Okay, welcome to Minivan Theology, the refrigerator magnet number 2. So I'm coming at you today. I traded the volleyball shift last night for the mall parking lot shift tonight. I'm not sure that that's the winning choice because it is now sleeting. So you might have some background ambience. That'll be the sound of sleet on the car. But I'm ready to go. And okay. So this is actually the second verse that I'm doing for the refrigerator magnet series. And if you didn't watch the intro, it's the verses that you find on tote bags and mugs and refrigerator magnets that just have the verse and maybe don't always have the full context. The verses are good. With the context, they're better. And so we're just going to take a little bit of a deep dive into those verses. And so I asked you guys what were your top verses that you wanted me to look at. And so this came in, it was my second one, and it was many of you's first one, but it's second in the series because that's just what I did. So, okay, it is Philippians 4:13. Say it with me. For I can do all things through him who gives me strength. Or you might have a version that says through Christ who gives me strength. We'll break that down. Okay, great verse. As always, I'm always going to say over and over, that verse is better than no verse at all, right? I'm not saying it's a bad verse, but we're going to find out why it's a great verse because we're going to look at the context tonight. Now, if you Google that verse, Philippians 4:13, and you look at the images that come up, if you click like the verse and then images, it's all kinds of crazy stuff. My favorite one was like a guy hanging from a cliff with like just 2 fingers, like this really sort of built guy, and like I guess the all things that God was going to enable him to do was like flip his body over, on top of the cliff and not fall to his death. There are images of people walking on beaches with like beautiful sunsets, and then there are a number of images of people in Superman or Superwoman costumes, like the part where they take off the day clothes and underneath, ta-da, they're a superhero, and then the verse is on there. Okay, this is why that is particularly funny to me, because if we could do all things, whatever we wanted, I think they've got something there with the Superman thing, which is, duh, ask any third grader, if you could do anything you wanted, what would you do? You'd fly. Of course you'd fly. And do you know how I know this? I have actual proof. Okay, the movie The Matrix. I realize that this dates me a little bit, and if you've not seen The Matrix, I'm totally going to spoil it for you, and you're going to have to live with that. I cannot help you if you haven't seen The Matrix. If you haven't seen The Matrix, I don't know how you've gotten through any church sermons ever, because, is it really a sermon without a Matrix reference? At the end of The Matrix, after Keanu Reeves, Neo, has realized he's the one, stop, I'm the one. He does his slow motion bullets are coming at him. He stands there and he, flexes in the world around him because he controls everything. He now controls the entire world around him. He stands there, and just as the end credits are about to roll, well, I paused it. The time that we were showing it to the girls for the first time, I paused it and I said to them, okay, if you could do anything in the whole world, what would you do? And Abby was like, I'd fly. Yeah, of course you'd do it. So I unpaused it, and there goes Neo. Shoo, he takes off and he flies. That's how I know that if we really could do all things, like the verse implies when it's just on a magnet, I wouldn't be here at the mall because I'd be like, hey, fly yourself down. I wouldn't be here. So obviously, that is not what the verse means. And I realize that it's a little tongue-in-cheek, so nobody send me nasty grams about referencing the Matrix with respect to the Bible. But in the first one of these, I talked about an analogy with the Grand Canyon. There's the postcard version of the Grand Canyon. Great, it's good. You get a sense of wow, that is very different and other than New England. There's driving to the Grand Canyon, which takes your breath away. You can't believe how big and incredible it is. And then there's hiking into the canyon. And we want to look at these verses in that sort of sequence. So the verse, we've got it. We've got it on the magnet. We've got it on the tote bag. Thank you to some of you who sent me pictures of Jeremiah 20:11 hanging in your house or on a mug. That was awesome. Some of you probably have this verse on a mug. But does it really mean we can do all things? And what's going on here? So we have to back up and we have to get the driving the car up to the edge of the canyon context for this verse. So the way we do that is we look at both the chapter it's in and the book that it's in. So Philippians 4, it's the 4th chapter in a book that only has 4 chapters. So if you want to do a little extra homework, you can go home and read Philippians because it's super short. It's 4 chapters. You can do it. But this comes at the end of the book, and some context for Philippians, which again, it's all just right here in my study Bible. I didn't have to go like do any special research on this. A good study Bible will have an intro and tell you this kind of stuff. We find out that Paul is in prison. And further, we know that he's in prison, not just because of the commentary at the beginning, but because he tells us himself. So in chapter 1 of Philippians, verses 12 to 14, and I'm going to read from a couple different versions here. This is New Living Translation. Okay, I have glasses. Look. This is just how it's going to be. So he says in chapter 1, I want you to know, my dear brothers and sisters, that everything that has happened to me, everything, has helped to spread the good news or the gospel. For everyone here, including the whole palace guard, or it's the praetorium, it's the Roman guards, know that I'm in chains. There's a context clue. Because of Christ and because of my imprisonment, also a clue, most of the believers here have gained confidence and boldly speak God's message without fear. Okay, so the context for the book of Philippians is that he's writing to the church of Philippi from prison. Now, there are a couple different theories about which imprisonment this was of Paul's. I mean, the point is he's had several imprisonments, but most people agree he's probably in Rome. This is probably not his final imprisonment. This is not the one where he's ultimately going to be martyred and put to death, which is all, part of history, not necessarily stuff that we can find in the Bible. But he doesn't know that. So he's in jail, and it is Crazy Pants Emperor Nero who's in charge when he's in prison in this context. So anything could happen. I mean, Nero was, a nutso. So Paul didn't know that this was the time that he was going to be released and continue to preach the gospel and then get imprisoned again. He didn't know that. So the context here at the end of the book of Philippians, when he says, I can do all things, is he's writing from jail. Now, he might have been in house arrest. It's possible. But I'm just going to say that doesn't matter. It doesn't make it better. It was at least 2 years. And anybody who's been through COVID, that's all of us, might have experienced, house arrest. We were in that first wave of COVID, and back when like the town nurse would call you and you couldn't leave your house for 14 days. And, I have a decent house. It's nice. There's multiple rooms. And I can tell you at day 14, I was all set, all done being in my house and being around these same 4 people. Love you guys. So imagine 2 years, in the ancient Near East in Rome. So it's not an ideal circumstance. It's that context that he writes this book to the church of Philippi. And do you know that if you Google this, and it is characterized by the word joy. This is a book that everybody sort of says this is one of his most joyful letters that Paul writes. He's full of joy. Well, how is that possible that he can be so full of joy? We're going to back up a little bit more here, and let's look at the text around our verse. So our verse is verse 13, but let's back up to verse 10. Classes. Okay, so I'm going to read 2 different versions of this just because it's good to hear it in 2 different versions. So he says, I rejoiced in the Lord greatly, and now at length that you have enjoyed your concern, that you have revived your concern for me. That's why I need glasses. Revived your concern for me. You were indeed concerned for me, but you had no opportunity. Not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am in to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Now that's in the ESV, which is, as you can tell, a little tangly on the tongue sometimes. In the NLT, he says the same thing, but let me start with verse 12. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I have learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it is with a full stomach or an empty one, with plenty or with little. For I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. So actually in the Greek, it doesn't say Christ, it says through the one, but it is a safe implication that he is referring to Christ. It's okay that some translations put Christ in there because that's what he's referring to. When Paul uses these extremes, he does this in other letters as well. It's like us saying from the left to the right, from up and down. In fact, Paul says in Romans 8 that nothing can separate us from the love of Christ. And he says neither height nor depth, nor angels, nor demons. He's giving opposite ends of the extreme, which means everything in the middle is part of what he's talking about. So when he says, I can do all things, he's talking about all circumstances. And he gives this little list, but it implies every circumstance. That's sort of the implication there when he says whether I'm full or whether I'm hungry. It also means, snacky or overly full. It means all the things in between. Whether I have little in a situation or an abundance in a situation. It also means the days when everything's just sort of even keel. He's talking about everything. And that's the secret to this verse. It's not saying he can do all things when things are fantastic or when he's in great need. It just means all the time. And the thing that's going on here with the I can do all things, that makes it sound like it's something that we can do under our power, under our steam. That's not actually what is implied here. The word for can do, I can do, it also could be translated to endure or to prevail. So if you think about being in a hard situation or even just sort of a middle ground situation, you can get through it. You can prevail. He's in house arrest, so we would call that a bad situation, right? Like that's not a good situation. This is a time of trial. He can get through it. He can prevail. Why? Not because he's so great, but because he serves a great God. He says, I can do things. Why? Because of Christ. The strength comes from Christ, not because Paul is, able to white knuckle his way through. This changes everything. Now we're going to go down into the Grand Canyon and we're going to hike around and look around from the bottom up and look around, see what, feel the sides, look at the wave the donkeys. Because it means wherever you're at in life. And the thing the Bible does not promise is happiness. It doesn't promise a perfect life. It doesn't promise there won't be suffering. In fact, there's a lot of suffering. It's a broken world. We have broken hearts. We have broken lives. There is suffering in this world. And Paul is saying that no matter what the circumstance, he's learned the secret to contentment. And the secret is not based on his circumstance, but it's based on his God. It's based on his faith in Jesus Christ. This means that if you are going through a hard time right now, a trial, however you might define that your faith in Jesus is enough to help you prevail to get through that circumstance. Now, I'm going to give a big caveat here, and I'm probably going to do this a number of times. I'm not talking about dangerous situations. I'm not talking about mental health situations where you should be seeking professional help. God does not tell us to check our brains at the door. If there's a problem going on, he has professionals out there for us to call and to get the help that we need. So this is not saying endure a dangerous situation, prevail a very dangerous situation. No. It might be saying prevail by calling, the authorities and getting help. But it is saying, Jesus isn't saying when you follow him that life is going to be all fancy rainbows and roses. In fact, it is going to probably have some hardship. And I know a number of you that have reached out to me and I know are watching these have gone through some very difficult things, some very difficult trials. And you know that your ability to get through those times and through those trials, or even right now be in the middle of those trials, is not based on your great power. It's not based on some magic formula. It's based on Jesus and the promise that he gives us for the life to come. Now, this is so interesting because Paul, earlier in Philippians, in the first chapter of these 4 chapters, Philippians, sometimes I get my Paul P letters mixed up, talks about whether it would be better to be alive doing ministry here on earth or to be in the new creation with Jesus. And he says, hey, it would be actually better, I'd be happier to be with Christ, but for now he calls me to stay here and do his work. So Philippians 1:21, I'm going to find it because I marked it with this handy paper towel. It makes a really good bookmark. Sorry to all of you ladies that have given me cute bookmarks over the years, but I'm running out. So Philippians 1:21, I'll read a little bit of context. He says, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. If I am to live in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me. That means, working for the gospel. Yet which shall I choose? I cannot tell. I am hard pressed between the two. My desire is to depart and be with Christ, for that is far better. But to remain in the flesh is more necessary on your account. Means while God calls us to be on this earth, we're to do the job that he's called us to do, which is to be faithful, to point people to Jesus, to follow him, and to prevail, to get through all the things, all the circumstances that he puts in our lives. But this is not the end. It's not even hardly the beginning. It's just scraping the surface. There's a new world, a new creation, a new life out there. And God is calling us someday to be there with him. And so that's our sort of from the Grand Canyon context. Remember, it's one story and there is one main character, And say it with me, it's not you. The main character is Jesus. The whole book of the Bible is a story about Jesus and his desire to be in relationship with us. And Paul is showing us here that that relationship extends to our nitty-gritty, messy, sitting in the parking lot in the mall lives. It extends to, the baby that's up in the 2 in the morning and doesn't ever go back to sleep. It extends to the strained marriage or the student that just can't study and can't get the grades and is struggling with understanding. It extends into all of that of our life. And God wants to be in relationship with us in those moments, but he calls us to someday come on out of that Grand Canyon and be in a better place. So we know that what Paul is saying here, I can do all things, means I can prevail, I can get through all things. Not because of us, but because of Jesus who strengthens us. We know that he's the source of our strength because he is our strength. So that's our second refrigerator magnet featuring today the glasses. Hope you enjoyed that. And look, almost 15 minutes. Great. Still on time, basically, sort of fudging it a little bit. All right, here's the minivan view. I know you'll like to see it. There's the mall. Boop-a-doo. Thanks for watching. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't done that already. I'm so close to having some threshold that makes, YouTube happy. We don't really care, but in case we do. Okay, thanks. Bye.